Getting kids to read can sometimes be a chore in this age of video games and texting, but putting kids inside the book is one way to get their attention. In today's Just Before 6 report, photojournalist Don Schoenfeld introduces us to a Chicago area author who left the Windy City to set her latest book right here in Michiana.
And Mr. Zip had found something, correct?
Mrs. Ringler is excited that her 5th grade class has found an interesting new book.
Reading becomes the tool that you use to find success.
As a teacher, she knows that reading is the foundation for a good education.
All kinds of books have mysteries, adventures, and all kinds of places that you don't even know, like magical worlds and creatures that are made up, and it kind of makes your imagination kind of real.
With player number 4 in what city?
But for this novel, the students' imaginations don't have to travel far. The setting for the book, The Danger Box, is in their own backyard.
It's really fun to just learn more stuff about the town that I've lived here for a while.
Blue has brought the community of Three Oaks alive, and this is a treasure that they'll be able to keep with them forever.
Our town. Three Oaks has one main street. The train between Chicago and Detroit runs through the middle of the town but doesn't stop. It hasn't since
1959. On either side of Elm Street.
Author Blue Balliett wrote The Danger Box. She is a teacher by trade and taught 3rd and 4th grade at the University of Chicago Lab School.
And I live in Hyde Park. I live inside my books. I live right in the neighborhood that my first 3 mysteries are set.
But Blue dreamed outside of her neighborhood when writing her 4th novel.
I had to write the book when I stumbled on a piece of information, and that's that a notebook belonging to one of the most famous thinkers of all time really was stolen. So of course I thought, that's it. I know who's going to find the notebook. A kid. And I knew I wanted it to turn up in a place that wasn't a likely spot. And so I just started exploring around within a comfortable radius of Chicago and found Three Oaks and fell in love with it. I realized very soon that I couldn't hide.
While doing research, Blue consulted with the children in Three Oaks.
And we kind of helped her with a couple of the main ideas with what to involve, where the characters should go.
And the kids were so open with me. They told me all kinds of secrets and what to look at and what to listen for and what they like to do. And
today, the students are 7th graders at River Valley Middle School.
It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I was really surprised when she dedicated the book to us.
To show her appreciation for their help, Blue Balliett opened and closed her book tour with the students, and the message of The Danger Box is wrapped in a mystery involving a Three Oaks boy and his research of Charles Darwin.
This very famous thinker whose notebook was stolen was a man also who he might have even been a special needs child if he had turned up in the school system now. And he went on to become one of the greatest thinkers of all time.
Are just actually thinking outside of this box.
I love that idea that weaknesses could possibly be strengths. We should never predict what's possible for kids.
The Danger Box is being translated into several languages, giving people around the world a chance to discover Three Oaks. And if you'd like to hear more from author Blue Balliett, head to WNDU.com and click on this story.
Teachers will tell you that reading is the foundation to a good education, and students in Three Oaks, Michigan are reading a new book dedicated to the children of Three Oaks. Today, best-selling author Blue Balliett visited 7th graders at River Valley Middle School in Three Oaks. Balliett credits the students for helping her write her latest novel, The Danger Box. The book is set in the small southwest Michigan town. The 5th grade students helped Balliett with her research, telling her about their town from their perspective.
If you step out your front door and you think, oh, there's nothing interesting here, it's all happening on the other side of the world, then you miss a lot. So I guess I'm always hoping that my books will reconnect kids to all the cool stuff that's going on right around them, no matter where they live.
Balliett started and ended her book tour in Three Oaks. She was excited to tell the students The Danger Box is being translated into Spanish, Japanese, German, and other languages, a chance for the world to hear about Three Oaks.
Teachers and parents teach young children the value of reading. Now, one group of students can read a book that was inspired by them. Best-selling author Blue Balliett has just come out with a new book entitled The Danger Box. She says her inspiration for the book was fifth graders at River Valley Middle School in Three Oaks, and today she came back to talk with them. The students helped Balliett with her research, telling her about the town from their perspective.
It's kind of exciting because, like, you know the places that they're talking about in the book, and, like, you've been there and you think, wow, I've been there, I've seen that place before.
I think it's a fun idea for a lot of kids, that you open up a piece of fiction that you know kids all over the world might be looking at, and there's your town and your world, and maybe a little bit of you.
The book is set in the small southwest Michigan town. The Danger Box is being translated in Spanish, German, Japanese, and other languages.
My name is Blue Balliett, and I was born in New York City and grew up in Manhattan. And I lived on Nantucket Island for years, and then my family and I have been in Chicago for the past almost 20 years. And I taught at the lab school. I was a classroom teacher, 3rd and 4th grade, for 10 years. And I live in Hyde Park. I live inside my books. I live right in the neighborhood that my first 3 mysteries are set in. I think I'm somebody who knew they wanted to write by the time I was 8 or 9 years old. I just always loved playing around with words in my head, and I loved to read, and I knew I wanted to write, but it took me a little while until I was writing full time. I did write a book of oral history. It's a collection of interviews about strange goings-on Nantucket Island, ghost stories, in my late 20s. And then I didn't write anything for years when my kids were born and I was teaching school. And then one year, when I was teaching, I had a group of kids who were really interested in art, and I have a degree in art history, and interested in unsolved mysteries. And so I thought, I know I could write them a book that they'd like to hear. So I really wrote Chasing Vermeer to read aloud to kids in my classroom, and I think that's why it's such a completely strange book. The first 3 books, I had a wonderful time using my neighborhood. Part of the Calder game, the 3rd mystery, is set in England, where I was on book tour and discovered a town I had to use. But when I got ready to write The Danger Box, I knew I couldn't have those characters be a part of the book, and I knew I didn't want the book to take place in a big city. I knew I wanted it in the United States. And The Danger Box was really a departure for me in a lot of ways. One of the reasons is that I felt I had to write the book when I stumbled on a piece of information, and that's that a notebook belonging to one of the most famous thinkers of all time really was stolen and still is gone. So of course I thought, that's it. I know who's going to find the notebook. A kid. And I knew I wanted it to turn up in a place that wasn't a likely spot and a place where it might not be recognized. And so I just started exploring around within a comfortable radius of Chicago and found Three Oaks and fell in love with it. It's just an amazing, tiny community. Very close to the city. I mean, I think it's 69 miles away, which is really nothing on the highway. But it's a world unto itself, and it's a very close community, and generations of people have stayed within the same community. And I just was fascinated by it. I mean, it's sort of like a little island surrounded by fields and woods. And the train runs through it between Chicago and Detroit, but hasn't stopped there for 50 years because it's too small to stop. Yeah, it's a magical place to me. In some ways, it's kind of a quintessential American small town. It's been around for a while. I think the first people settled there in the 1850s, but it's sleepy, 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 and really quiet. It was a very different research process for me because I always do a huge amount of reading as, sort of background and to make sure I have all the facts I want. And then I pick and choose when I'm actually writing in terms of art ideas and I don't want to give anything away about the Danger Box in case you haven't read it. Some of the ideas that, and some of the details about the life of this big thinker who I was writing about, who lost his notebook. I did a huge amount of reading about him, but in terms of getting comfortable with the town, I first went back and forth and walked around a little, and then I realized very soon that I couldn't hide. Somebody actually asked me, "Is there something you're looking for? We saw you here last week, and we noticed you in the library the week before." And they asked me in the nicest, most helpful way, not in a prickly way. So I realized that for better or worse, I really needed to go belly up and just introduce myself and see what happened. And I wasn't sure if I would be able to write the book once I couldn't hide anymore, because always when I'm trying to get a feeling for setting, I'm trying to be as invisible as I can be and just listen and look at everything, and I couldn't really do this. But I went right into this elementary school in town and introduced myself to the principal, Gary Lang, and he was so helpful, lovely guy who grew up in Three Oaks. And he got me together with several classes of kids. So I spent a little time in the school and talking with the kids, which was fabulous, and they had never met an author before. I don't know that they'd ever had an author visit the school. So I felt very welcome, and everybody was very, very helpful, and that really made it possible for me to write the book. I wouldn't have wanted to intrude if I hadn't felt like it was okay with everybody I'd met. But that was an adventure. It never occurred to me when I started that I couldn't hide. I loved the kids of Three Oaks. I had a great time getting to know them, and it's actually a very small group of kids that go to school. That school services a 90-mile radius of Three Oaks, which is a big area. And it's a small group. Everybody knows each other, and the families all know each other. And I felt very lucky to have a chance to get to know them. And the kids were so open with me. And I asked them what they wanted me to include in the book, and I couldn't include everything, but they told me all kinds of secrets and what to look at and what to listen for and what they liked to do. And they were really touching and really interesting. They were great kids. And I did promise them that when I knew I was going to be going on a book tour when the book was written, and I said I will come back and I'll start in Three Oaks and then I'll come visit again when I'm finished traveling. So this past September I started in Three Oaks and had a wonderful time, was very shocked. I thought I was just coming to say hi to the kids and read them a chapter. But they had made me a danger box, a black wooden box that they'd painted and they'd written on with chalk, and there were purple pens inside for signing and a notebook and a t-shirt, and it was all wrapped up in caution tape, and it was very, very touching. They had made me a big banner. So the kids have been so responsive, and it's really been fun to have a group of kids that I was working with while writing the book. That's a first for me. I mean, as a teacher, I'm always thinking about the experiences I've had in the classroom, but having kids involved as I was writing was different. The message behind the book is, first of all, I think it's just something I believe so deeply, but if you look closely at the world around you, no matter what age you are, you see fascinating things, you see mysteries, you see issues that need to be worked on. Everybody's neighborhood is a rich place filled with intrigue when you look closely enough. And for the Danger Box, my main character, Zumi, was a kid who's grown up a little bit different, and he has very limited eyesight. He's actually legally blind. So he can see, but he doesn't see what most of us see. He sees only out this far with his glasses on and just this far without them. but he looks at the world very carefully. And part of my message in the Danger Box was that I just wanted to raise the question about, is it possible that sometimes physical differences of that kind can be an advantage, can allow you to accomplish something that people who are seeing in a different way might not accomplish. So Zumi actually does see the world more carefully in many ways. And when I was working on the book, I went to an eye doctor at the University of Chicago and asked her to fit me with lenses so that I could see the way Zumi sees. And that was really neat. So I got to see everything in focus out to here, and then I got a feeling for what it might be like. You see movement, you see lots of light, but you don't see the details beyond that. And then she put glasses on herself and allowed me to see what Zumi's eyes might look like with his glasses on. So I got a little glimpse, and when I was writing, the book is written in the first person. I was inside Zumi's head trying to see the world as he was seeing it, which was really fun and really, really interesting. But I love that idea that weaknesses could possibly be strengths. And really, the reason I began thinking about that is that this very famous thinker whose notebook was stolen was a man also who had, he might have even been a special needs child if he had turned up in the school system now. He had lots of anxieties. He hated school. He didn't do his homework. He couldn't really seem to do anything he didn't want to do. He had certain sides to him that might have looked a little obsessive compulsive to some people now. He needed to collect things. He needed to make lists. He didn't like surprises and changes. He was a special kind of person. And he went on to become one of the greatest thinkers of all time. I mean, he's responsible for an idea that not everybody agrees with, but that has changed the way most people view life on Earth. But he was a kid who really might have had a very rough time in our schools now. So when I learned this about his life, after learning about this notebook and knowing I wanted to build a book around it, I thought, how inspiring. I really want to make this man available to kids. I want kids to get a feeling for who he was, because if somebody who started out with all these complicated ways of seeing the world and behavior issues went on to do what he did, you know, where's the ceiling? There's so many things that all kinds of kids can accomplish. So I love the idea that we should never predict what's possible for kids. I'm somebody who has very deep, honest respect for kids' thinking, and I've thought for a long time now, it's not just my own 3 kids and, you know, bringing them up, but the hundreds of kids I taught, that kids' brains by the time they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are in really good shape, and they can make connections that our adult brains sometimes no longer make. In some ways because we've been trained out of seeing everything as clearly. And the longer I taught, the more fascinated I was by what kids were capable of putting together in their minds. I mean, their skill level holds them back to a certain degree. You know, they're not writing the way an adult would, or they're not doing mathematics the way somebody might years later. But their ability to see the world, put it together, decode, understand big ideas is so powerful. And as a teacher, I got frustrated sometimes by how little there was in the way of adventuresome reading material that gave kids access to big ideas that grown-ups were grappling with too, that are mysterious and are fun to think about, and you know, that we need to be thinking about. And I don't like the assumption that kids can't get there. Kids can in a flash. They're so quick. And they learn so quickly. If you give them a way to encode something, the codes that are buried in the books are not things that I would have put in for myself. I don't feel like I'm very good at codes or even that good at pentominoes. But 8 and 9-year-olds are all about encoding. That's really what you're doing when you're learning to write. That's what you're doing when you're learning mathematics. You're just learning codes, really. And they're so quick. It's fascinating to watch how quickly kids can absorb code and, you know, use it. Their brains are just so good. And I started to think, we don't respect kids' brain power nearly enough. And also, why aren't we giving kids access to more big ideas earlier? I know for me, growing up in New York City, one of my favorite books that probably, maybe it changed my life, I never forgot it, and I might not have written Chasing Vermeer if it hadn't gotten into my head when I was 12, was E.L. Konigsberg's book, The Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. And it was the first piece of fiction I'd ever read that was set in a place I knew. It was set in Manhattan. I'd been to the Metropolitan. And there were 2 kids who ran away and did their own thing and grappled with big art ideas. And it was so respectful of kids' thinking. It thrilled me. I loved that book. I never forgot it. And, you know, I think what you read at that age is really important. That's really why I'm writing for kids. I so believe that, and I love to write for people that age. It's such a great age. I mean, by the time you're an adult, you have so many other things happening, and you're so distracted, and you've kind of forgotten to think a lot of the time because you're so busy being busy. So kids are brilliant and fascinating. It just seemed sort of like real life to me when I was writing about that stuff. It just came out naturally. I mean, my character Zumi in the book doesn't really know who his parents are. He thinks he knows who his father is. His father's not around. He really doesn't know who his mother is. But it doesn't seem to matter. He's growing up with grandparents who are thrilled to have him and love him, and he's definitely, you know, just another kid in the town. And then when his father does turn up, his father has substance issues. And, you know, unfortunately for many kids, that's a part of life too. That was so important to me, the idea of making museums available to kids, and available to kids in whatever way they wanted to experience them. Actually, the Arthur Wheelock, who's the Vermeer expert at the National Gallery, he said that he's amazed by the numbers of kids who come into that gallery and know a lot about Vermeer. And he's walked through there sometimes with people from other parts of the world. I think there are only 5 big Vermeer experts in the world, and he's the one in the United States. He's walked in and seen kids explaining things to their parents about, you know, this is when this was painted, and this is what he did, and this is what his family. So he's told me that he thinks it's really fascinating too. And the Art Institute is very kid-friendly too, I think. And it should be. I feel like kids should be able to wander around and look at what they want to look at in the way they want to see it. Yeah, I sort of hate it when everyone tells kids how to look at things and tells them to. Yeah. Yeah, Miss Hussey and I had stuff in common, for sure.
Are you like Miss Hussey, or?
I think she's probably cooler than I am. She wore her pajamas to school and had all those earrings and everything. But yeah, I think we look at learning the same way, for sure. I had such a good time being a teacher. I do. I mean, that's really, I would never have written these books without those years as a teacher, because I just learned so much from the kids and with the kids. You know, I would ask them, what do you guys want to work on this year? And then we'd build all our skills into it. So that's how we ended up learning about Frank Lloyd Wright, and we did different things every year. That's really how Chasing Vermeer got written. I put all of my brain into each one of these books, and they're really different from each other. So each book, I just loved the best while I was working on it, because I was focused so hard on it. You know the way if you concentrate really hard on something, it feels good. So I don't know, they're very different from each other. It's not like most series, those 3 books. Each one is sort of completely its own thing. So that's hard for me to say. At the moment, I'm thinking The Danger Box was the most fun, but as soon as I get going on a new book, I'll probably think that's the most fun. I've had a good time writing them. This chapter is called Our Town. Three Oaks has one main street. The train between Chicago and Detroit runs through the middle of the town but doesn't stop. It hasn't since 1959. On either side of Elm Street, that's the one with the stores, are parallel streets with blocks of wooden houses, 2 to the west and 3 to the east. An old sign at the edge of town says, "Welcome to Three Oaks. Happy to have you. Sorry to see you go." There's one official map, and I know it by heart, north to south. Most of the streets are named after trees: pine, chestnut, walnut, buckeye.